October 5th 2019, and welcome to episode 9 of Plane Savers Down Under. And you can see after all this time the wind hasn't left us alone. Today we're in Canberra, the capital city of Australia, and the reason we're here is down the bottom of a long promenade, Anzac Avenue, between the War Memorial, the dome building down the bottom here, and Parliament House, the old one, the white building in the distance behind Lake Belly Griffin, and the new tower, or the newer Parliament House behind that. You can see the tall flagpole with the Australian flag on it. This is Canberra, overlooking Canberra from Mount Ainslie. If I go over this side, this is Canberra Airport, and the white dome building you can see in the distance is the RAAF base, RAAF Fairburn, where the VIP flights are held. But there, that's where we're headed, down there to the War Memorial to have a look at the aviation section. There's a bit of a view of what Canberra looks like. It's a very pretty city, very nice, very planned city by Lake Belly Griffin, including even the lake in the middle. And here we are down at the War Memorial, close-up view of Anzac Avenue looking through to the old Parliament House and the new one. And hopefully the sun won't make too much of a mess of this picture. And here we are, the entrance to the War Memorial. I hope you'll forgive the photography. Like many museums, unfortunately, the Australian War Memorial likes to keep the lights dim with spotlights on certain features, which makes photography very difficult. As you can see, we're in the aircraft hall now. There's a split between two buildings, the original building you saw from the outside and a new annex out the back. Here is a mixture of theatres. We start off with the CAC Mustang that was in the Korean theatre. Unfortunately, this is a terrible shot because of the lighting. This is a MiG-15, one of the adversaries in the Korean War faced by the Mustangs. Then we come across to the Sea Fury, which was operated by the Royal Australian Navy in the Korean theatre. We now start off with some of the aircraft from the Second World War, and firstly we have the CAC WWI. Compared with the previous examples we've seen of restored or partially restored WWI, this one has all the internals fitted into the aircraft. Now we have a Curtiss P-40E Kitty Hawk by the name of Polly. Polly had a very illustrious career. She came to New Guinea with 75 Squadron back in August 1942. She then served at Milne Bay on the eastern tip of Papua during the fighting there when the Japanese suffered their first defeat in the Pacific area. The aircraft was flown regularly by a Flight Lieutenant Buster Brown and later on by Squadron Leader Wilfred Arthur, who, leading a major attack against the last huge Japanese air attack in Milne Bay, was awarded the Distinguished Service Order for bravery of attacking without weapons. Above us is the underside of a Mitsubishi Zero, and we'll get a better photo of that in a minute. This is again a very unique aircraft. This is a Mitsubishi A6M2 model 210. It fought in the Pacific campaign in northern New Guinea and was flown by the 4th ranking Japanese ace Subaru Sakai. And now we have a PR-41 model Mosquito reconnaissance aircraft used by the RAAF. This is Avro Lancaster B1, G for George. Very well known in Australia and one of the top exhibits at the Australian War Memorial. G for George flew the full 90 operational missions over Germany and occupied Europe during the height of the bomber offensive. Was built in 1942 and remained in active service up to 1944, being flown at that time by 460 Squadron RAAF, which was one of the RAAF squadrons attached to the Royal Air Force. Here is a Messerschmitt Me-109 G6 fighter aircraft. This has, whilst the operational history is not known of the aircraft, during inspection it can be determined that it had been in action, as it was under refurbishment in December 1944. So it is an aircraft that had served in the European theatre, maybe the Western or Eastern Front. It's unknown. Now back to the Lancaster. We'll have a walk around the aircraft and have a good look at it. Here's a shot of that enormous bomb bay that enabled the Lancaster to be the preeminent heavy bomber of the Second World War, until overtaken very late in the war by the B-29 Stratofortress. But compared to every other bomber up until that late 1944-45, this was the heavy bomber that set the standard. Again, please accept my apologies for the quality of the photography, the lighting conditions. when I look at some of these shots, do make it difficult. Now we move into the First World War era, and this becomes the time of the Australian Flying Corps, not the RAAF. It was set up only a couple of years after the end of the First World War, and is now the second oldest air force in the world. But these are all World War I aircraft. If my high school German disappoints you, I'm not sure whether this is a flats, well, I'll call it a flats D12 Scout. It was an operational aircraft during the First World War and was gifted to Australia as part of the terms of the armistice. It was a Scout aircraft with 2 forward firing machine guns. We move on now to one of the training aircraft of the AFC, the Avro 504K. Above us is the Royal Aircraft Factory SE-5A fighter used by British and Imperial forces, and would have encountered the flats and the Albatross that we are to see shortly. This Albatross D5A has a remarkable history. Built in 1917, it was one of 6 that were engaged a number of AFC RE-8 aircraft over the front line. A air battle ensued, and one aircraft of the RWA or the AFC was shot down, and as was this Albatross. It crashed near the front lines and was recovered by troops and rebuilt and then handed over to Australia at the end of the war. You might be wondering why what looks like a civilian aircraft's in the memorial. This is a de Havilland DH9, and it has a very special place for 2 reasons. One, it represents the bombers flown by the AFC during the First World War. The AFC flew DH9s. It was also the first single engine aircraft to fly from England to Australia, and was flown by 2 AFC lieutenants, Ray Para and John McIntyre. Aeroplane, there are only 4 DH9s left in the world. The Battle of Milne Bay was a significant turning point in the war. Followed up very closely behind that was the Battle of the Kokoda Track. Today at the Trelaura Technology Centre of the Australian War Memorial. Hopefully you'll excuse the jittering of the camera, because once inside we're not allowed to use selfie sticks, and I find the selfie sticks helps me keep it a pretty steady operation. But anyway, so we'll see what the tree is. This is the new storage complex that have just been opened to take all the major aviation exhibits of the War Memorial. I was lucky enough to get here first up early this morning to get into the complex before the huge crowds that followed it on. You'll have to excuse me, I'll have to walk around here and just take videos on the move before the crowds do flow in. You'll see a number of things. I won't be able to identify them. Not all of the stored items have been labelled, so it's very hard. Here is the APC-3 Orion that has just been retired. It's just been brought in, and I'll see what I can identify as we move around. This is one of the original airframes of a Demoiselle trainer that was used by the AFC back in 1915. It's still here, ready to be restored. Move on then to the yellow Tiger Moth, and the forward upper fuselage you can see up on the top of the racking is actually that of a MiG-29. At the top of this racking is a twin-engine Kawasaki KA-54C Hickory that was surrendered to Australian forces in Borneo, and below that is a Pilatus Porter served with the Australian Army. And again we have a F-111. This one is different to the other ones we've seen. There was only 4 of these constructed. This is an RF-111C, the reconnaissance version of the fighter bomber that was served with the RAAF. The Bell 47G, the Sioux, and in the background the Westland Wessex, this time showing how the tail rotor assembly swivels for storage on a carrier. We then move on to the Canberra bomber before reaching a historic aircraft. And its history was after the war. This is a Douglas C-47B, and it was built actually in 1945 and then given to Australia as part of Lend-Lease payments from the US to Australia. It then was used in 1945 to carry the body of our wartime Prime Minister John Curtin from Canberra to Perth. A very historic aircraft. Then another Caribou and a Firefly. This Sabre you're looking at appears to be an American machine, but is in fact a CAC Sabre. It was disposed of after the Sabres retired and spent time in America, where it was obviously painted in American colours, then in New Zealand before returning to Australia and purchased by the museum. Then we're into the helicopters, the mighty Chinook, the versatile Huey, the H model, looks like a Gazelle down the back, a Kiowa and a Seahawk. There are various missiles, bombs and engines on display. Some are labelled and many are not, so I'll just wander around and let you have a look at them. This is the nose section of a Lockheed C-130H Hercules. We'll take a wander down the hall now and look at some of the artefacts they've got stored. As I said, there are engines, various structural parts of aircraft. There's turrets, fuel tanks, centre sections, tail planes, fins, you name it, all seems to be here. As I said, some of it is labelled, and obviously some of it is miles too high for me to be able to reach, but we'll just sort of wander down and have a look at what's here. It's a shame I can't be more explicit in some of these items that are stored here. I hope it whets your appetite to come and have a look at the War Memorial. The Trelaura Annex is only open twice a year, and you need to be aware of that and come in here to when it's open. But the War Memorial is open every day except those normal Christmas, Easter, etc. holidays. Coming up is something totally different and not aviation related. It's a Furphy water cart used during the First World War. However, a Furphy in Australia is Australian slang for someone telling you a tall story they claim to be factual. In other words, they're telling you a Furphy. Above is the centre section of a Nakajima KA-43 Oscar. Bit hard with the lights. Here's a Mark 8 Beaufort bomber, similar to the version we're doing. I think we're a little bit further advanced, but at the same time probably there is more work up in the cockpit has been done on this one by the looks of it. And over here is a genuine V2 rocket. And here we have one of the latest acquisitions for the museum, an OV-10 Bronco. The reason it's here, RAAF pilots flew these in Vietnam, and this one now is under restoration. It's just been primed and painted, so good to see this one up and operating, or getting to the stage where it'll be nicely restored. Okay, here's the centre section of a OV-10 Bronco. Give you an idea of what it'll look like before it's been restored. This photo is courtesy of the Australian War Memorial. I hope you enjoyed your visit to the Australian War Memorial in Canberra. You'll note we've only paid attention to the aviation exhibits. There is so much more to see here. There is captured Japanese submarines that take Sydney Harbour, there's mobile equipment, naval equipment, and we go right back until the Boer War. So there is a lot to see, a lot to do. Research facilities and some fantastic exhibits. To all those men and women who served, suffered horrendous injuries, or gave their lives in the cause of peace, no matter for which nation, lest we forget. Until next time.